Welcome to this special edition of Go Vote Omaha, a candidate forum for Legislative District 9 of the Nebraska Legislature, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. LD9 is the Midtown Omaha district, bordered by 480 and 28th Street in the east and 72nd Street in the west, Dodge, Leavenworth, Hawthorne, and Nichols Street in the north, and Grover, Bancroft, and Martha Street in the south. I'm MaryLee Moulton, Communications Director of the League and moderator for this forum. The League never supports or opposes political parties or candidates. We present this forum solely for educational purposes. The format is as follows. Each candidate will get a 1-minute opening statement, followed by questions prepared by the League of Women Voters. Each candidate will answer every question and will have up to 90 seconds to answer. Following the questions, each candidate will have a 2-minute closing statement. We alternate speaking order throughout the forum. Our timekeeper, League member Jerry Simon, will signal candidates when they have 30 seconds of time remaining and when to stop speaking. Before the forum, the candidates flipped a coin to determine the initial order of speaking, and I will introduce them now in that order. There are 2 candidates running for Legislative District 9. They are Marque Snow and John Cavanaugh. And Mark, we will start with your opening statement.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. My name is Marque Snow. I lived in Omaha, Nebraska for almost 10 years with my husband. We live in Gifford Park, and I currently sit on the Omaha Public School Board, and I've sat in that role for the last 7.5 years, and I've been board president the last 3 of those years. I'm running for the Nebraska Legislature to represent you in Legislative District 9 in Lincoln for 4 reasons. 1, to make sure that we close as many loopholes as we can with property taxes, as well as individuals paying taxes there. 2, making sure that we fully fund our public education system, as well as it's the kind of the backbone of our state of Nebraska. And then 3, if you look at that, focusing on paid family medical leave and looking at Medicaid expansion and how do we really look at our healthcare system, especially now during COVID. So I hope you vote for me. If not, I can give you as much information so when you do vote on November 3rd, you have an educated decision in polling. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we will turn it now over to John Cavanaugh.
Thank you, MaryLee and Jerry and Mark. Thanks for being here. My name is John Cavanaugh, born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. Live in Midtown, also 58th and Leavenworth area, Exarban. I went to law school to study environmental law and environmental policy, and have spent the last 7 years as a public defender here in Douglas County. And I always say that the reason that I went to law school for environmental policy and environmental law, and why I'm in criminal justice, indigent defense, is that those 2 things both adversely affect those who are least able to stand up and fight for themselves. And that's the same reason I'm running for legislature. Is I think as a society, we can do a better job. We can lift people up. We can build better. And I think that that's the reason I'm running for legislature, is that I want to do better for our society. I think that we should be expanding access to education, expanding access to mental health care, expanding access to stable housing, long-term stable housing, job opportunities, building infrastructure that will support everyone so they can get to a job and they can, that's I'm out of time. I'll keep talking later.
Okay, so the first question, because Mark opened, the first question will go to John. And it is, and what do you think about privatization of schools, and what does an equitably funded public school system look like?
Well, I'm against public funding for private schools. I think that one of the fundamental roles of the government is to provide a high quality public education for everyone. I'm opposed to taking away any of that funding and applying it to any other type of school, whether they be religious oriented or secular charter schools. I think an equitable education system is one that gives everybody an opportunity to get a high quality education. And I think we can do that if we start meeting our obligation, our commitment to each other, which means more funding from the state to the local school districts. We've had years and years where the state has talked about this. Everybody across the state talks about making it a priority and talking about increasing funding to local schools, but it's always the first thing that we cut in the legislature or that we don't add. And so I think an equitable school system is one that adequately funds those schools, make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get a high quality education. And it starts with universal pre-K. It starts with in-school care, access to healthcare in schools that are necessary. It's a universal free lunch for kids to make sure that they're not going hungry when they're at school. It has to do with after-school programs. They're going to make sure that kids have an opportunity to be engaged in their community, learn other skills besides the school skills, and have other opportunities so that they can be prepared for the world when they go out there. So I think that it ultimately has to do with our commitment to education. Sorry. Thanks.
Okay, Marque Snow, your turn.
Can you reread the question for me?
Sure, absolutely. What do you think about privatization of schools, and what does an equitably funded public school system look like?
So first, I'm against the privatization of our schools. I've testified many times in the legislature at hearings when, every year they want to lower people's property taxes at the back of our public school districts in the state of Nebraska. And when you think of that, that's over 200 plus school districts that are doing everything they can with the funding they receive. Now, this year alone, Omaha Public Schools, we lost about 7% in receipts for our school funding. We've been relying heavily on our property taxes to really fund our schools. But how do we really fund our schools and make sure it's equitable across? We first have to look at special education. In a lot of our urban areas, even our rural communities, special education needs more attention, and we need to make sure those families are taken care of. We also need to look at making sure that our school-based health centers expand, not just in Omaha, but across the entire state. Many of our families, especially our children, are dealing with mental, social, emotional health issues that don't get diagnosed until later on in their life. And I think in school, we can really help them there. Another thing I have on there is making sure that when we focus on our public schools and public education, we need to look at how do we pay and compensate our teachers and our employees. These men and women are working every single day. They're putting their own money into making sure our students are taken care of. And I think from the legislature, what we can do is we can lower their tax that they pay in retirement. I believe that's 7% to, at the end of the day, the reason why they stay in education is for the long run. And I think we can help them there. Thank you.
Okay, on to our second question. And this one will start with Mark. According to racialequitytools.org, structural racism in the U.S. is the normalization and legitimization of an array of dynamics, historical, cultural, institutional, and interpersonal, that routinely advantage whites while producing cumulative and chronic adverse outcomes for people of color. How should Nebraska deal with structural racism in its institutions?
That's a great question. I'm just going to speak from experience. I think the best way for Nebraska to really pay attention to that and change the institutions that we currently need, education, our judicial system, as well as our legislative system, is by advocating for those who aren't there, but also uplifting those who aren't in those positions. So give you an example right now, if you look at the unemployment in the city of Omaha, because that's where I'm giving most of those examples. You look at the unemployment of the African-American community, Blacks, Brown, as well as Latino community, that population of unemployment is skyrocketing across the entire city, and it's the highest unemployment compared to white. And when you look at those communities, how do you have economic impact there? We as a community to focus on those systems is people need jobs. They need high quality jobs. They need high quality education so they can feed their family. It's really hard for someone to just show up and say, I'm going to help you get out of poverty. I'm going to help your community and help the injustice that your family has been incurring. If I'm not going to give you the quality education that you need, if I'm not going to give you the decent, high quality job that is going to pay them a livable wage and make sure that they can take care of their families in times like this. And it's needed because when you go to those communities, those are the communities that, if you notice, there's more police cars than usual. There are more corner stores than usual and not as much fresh produce and food deserts. Sorry.
That's okay.
I feel like we'll be saying stop and sorry a lot.
Okay, John Cavanaugh, how should Nebraska deal with structural racism in its institutions?
So I'm a public defender. I work in the criminal justice system, and I know Mark alluded to the fact that there's parts of town that have a lot more police cars than other parts of town. And I can tell you, I see that day in, day out. And I think there are many things we need to do to address structural racism. We do need to invest in high quality education We need to invest in childcare. We need to invest in access to healthcare so that everybody has that equal shake at life. We need to make sure that people can get to those jobs. There are jobs in Omaha that a lot of people can't get to because of our infrastructure. Our mass transit system is subpar, and you have to drive everywhere. And that's one of the ways I kind of came into being interested about infrastructure in the city is a number of my clients who couldn't get to jobs. So that's a big part of it. But yeah, the criminal justice aspect of it, there's a whole systemic racism as it pertains to our laws. We need to legalize marijuana. We need to decriminalize a lot of the other controlled substances. We need to stop incarcerating people for mental health issues, for drug and alcohol issues. But we need to stop sending people to jail for minor offenses. We need to stop holding people in jail for on bond for these minor offenses. They lose their house, they lose their job, they lose their programming. And that is one of the cornerstones of this institutional racism in this city and every city. Is that we use small offenses to ruin people's lives, and we need to stop doing that. And that's one of the things I'm going to focus on when I get in the legislature.
Okay. All right, on to our next question, and John Cavanaugh begins this question. So Latinx people are a rising electorate in Nebraska. What do you think their issues are, and how would you advocate for that community? Also, can you speak specifically as to whether you would support regulation of meatpacking plants where many Latinx are essential workers?
Well, I think that a lot of the issues that are of interest to Latinx people in Nebraska are going to be the same as everybody else. They want a good life. They want a job. They want to take care of their kids. They want to feel safe in their home. They want to be stable in their home. They want a chance to advance. So, and of course, yes, I'm 100% in favor of regulating the meatpacking industry. I think that worker safety should be paramount, and it's sad that we still have to have that conversation in this country. You know, my family came to this state to be meat packers 100 years ago, and a number of them died as a result of diseases they contracted there. So I think we need to make sure that, yeah, we're making this workplace safe. But ultimately, I think that that Latinx folks want the same thing everybody wants, which is that opportunity to succeed, and that we should be focusing on making sure that they have the access to the same things that we all want. I think I wasn't paying attention. Did I lose the timer?
Oh.
No? Oh, there's 30 seconds. I felt like I was talking for a really long time. So yeah, I mean, that is the same issues I think that everybody's facing. Stability in housing, job opportunity, educational opportunity, healthcare, and just a chance for their kids to be successful and thrive in Nebraska, which is what we all want.
Okay. Marque Snow, would you like the question repeated, or are you good?
I think I got most of it.
Okay.
I think I did. So start with meatpacking plants. I think anyone not supporting that, and I think that decision that came from our governor and those officials was completely racist. If you look at our state, the growing Latino population in our state is going to be the largest population in the state of Nebraska. If they don't have high quality education, access to good paying jobs, it's going to be hard for those majority white families, white people that are going into retirement. Who's going to pay for those roads? Who's going to pay for that public transportation? Who's going to keep the state strong? It's going to be our strong Latino community, and we have to completely invest in them. We have to make sure that they have access to banks, access to loans, access to equity, access to being able to start a construction business and be able to uplift that business so they can compete against some of the larger or mid-sized construction companies or businesses in Omaha. One of the things that I've noticed, especially in South Omaha, because I worked in South Omaha for 5 years, is that the community in South Omaha, especially the Latino community there, has been able to grow their own and support their own. And I think as a state, and what we should do in the legislature, what we should do as individual citizens, is go to them and find out what they want. Listen to them what they need, because that's the only way we're going to get out of this. That's the only way we're going to work together. We cannot sit here at tables and say, this is what we're going to do to help a population that's not even in the room. We have to make sure that they have a seat there, that they have a voice. We have to listen, and we have to make sure that we act as much as we can to empower them, because when you look at places like, oh, sorry.
Okay. So let's move on to the next question, and Marque Snow will start with this one. The country and Nebraska are very polarized. Nebraska has a proud nonpartisan tradition in its legislature. How would you encourage congeniality and collaboration in the nonpartisan legislature?
It's nonpartisan on paper, but we know in reality it's not sometimes, especially with some of the factions we have there. How do you continue that? How do you work across the aisle? I've been doing that for the last 8 years on the OPS school board, working with people from a very conservative side to those that don't even believe in my lifestyle. And we have to work with them because we have to focus on the end goal. And the end goal is to make sure that we pass the budget, we empower our kids and teachers, and that we hold our superintendent accountable. And when you focus on those issues, and primarily, especially in Nebraska, when you focus on the brass tacks issues and you take the politics out of it, you can really create a deal with people from across the aisle. I look at Senator Chambers, when you're talking about the death penalty ban that went on and getting the legislature to support that, the focus on that wasn't the death penalty. The focus was the fact that the state of Nebraska was going to spend millions, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it doesn't matter what the issue was. It was the fact that he was able to work across the aisle, convince people from another side that it was the best decision for our state and the best decision for Nebraska. And when we all work together, we all grow together and we do better. And the best way to do it is to listen to others. And if everybody walks away a little mad from a deal, that means you got something done. That means everybody got something done there. And I'm excited to do that in Lincoln. And I have that experience and I've grown into this role and I'm looking forward to showing it more.
Okay, John Cavanaugh, how would you encourage congeniality and collaboration in the nonpartisan legislature?
Well, I would probably echo what Mark said, that it is nonpartisan on paper to a certain extent. Yeah, so I'm a public defender, if you don't know that, which means I work in an adversarial criminal justice system. I have to work with prosecutors whose specific goal is to convict my client of whatever it is they're alleging that they did, which basically means they're out to get them. And I have to find, not every case is litigated, meaning we don't have a trial necessarily. There's a lot of negotiated resolutions. And so you have to find what we consider a mutually beneficial resolution to most of our cases. And so starting out with somebody having the diametrically opposed objectives, I've done that thousands of times, negotiated those sorts of situations and come to a mutually beneficial resolution. I think the way you do that is you go in and you state your case, your argument, your best perspective on things, and you listen to what they have to say honestly, and you take it and you internalize it. I think you got to do the same sort of thing in the legislature. I think you have to go and be honest with people on the face. You say, when I can't agree with you, I'm going to agree with you. When I disagree with you, I'm going to disagree with you, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to bait and switch on you or anything like that. But you also have to go up to people and say, what can we work together on? You have to go find somebody who has the most opposite views of you and say, well, there are certain things where we're going to agree about, and we're going to want to make that happen. And so we'll work on those things, and on the other things, we'll be on opposite sides. And so it's just about being honest and on the level with people and building a rapport.
Okay. All right, on to the next question. So, and this would go to John Cavanaugh first. In your legislative district, what do you believe are the top 2 issues most important to your constituents? And tell us about how you would work on those issues in the legislature.
Well, in our district, there are a lot of folks in older houses that are, in particular, the price value of the house as for tax purposes are increasing. And so a lot of people in our district have lived in their houses for a long time. And now their house is worth way more than they used to, than they paid for it or that they budgeted in. When somebody buys a house, when I bought a house, I looked and I said, this is how much I expect to be able to pay every month. And in that time, the amount I have to pay, it goes up because the taxes have gone up so much. So property taxes are a concern in our district, and it has to do with the fact that the houses, I think, are continuing to be increasing in value. High quality education is always an important issue. And you know, the legislature in this particular session was trying to pit those 2 issues against each other. And we can't let that happen. One of the reasons people want to live in this part of town is both of those things. We have good education, we have great houses. And so in the legislature, I'm going to fight to make sure that we get more state dollars for education to continue to make sure that the quality of education here is high. And those, when you put more state dollars into education, that'll help decrease the levy that we need to assess to pay for that education. So those two things go hand in hand. We have to do that through raising revenue from other sources, but I'm not in favor of shifting revenue from one person to another to pay for that. And I do think that there are alternative sources of revenue that, like the gambling petition that's on the ballot this year. And I guess I'll stop talking.
Okay, Marque Snow.
Well, I agree with Cavanaugh on this, focusing on finding different streams of revenue. I believe in the supporting recreational marijuana and using that tax that we can get from there for our public education, finding ways for gambling that we can bring in additional revenue. Many voters that live in LD9 struggle in their homes, have been living there for decades, and they're retired, so they have a fixed income. Their healthcare is rising. There's a sick individual in the home that might have cancer or something, and their property taxes are jumping $30,000 overnight. We have to work on making sure that there's an annual inflation on people's property. We also need to focus on our aging population in the state of Nebraska. We're going to have a large population that is going to be in the retirement community, and we're going to be a retirement state. And if we don't have laws that support a retirement community, why would you stay in Nebraska? You can just move to Iowa or, Colorado, and you pay less money in taxes there. I support and will advocate for a property tax assessment freeze, which freezes people that have been in their home for over 20 years, that are over the age of 65, and they're locked in at that rate as long as they live in that house. And if they move, it actually gets reassessed, and whoever moves in there has to pay that. States like Oklahoma, Texas, and California have done this to support their aging and older community there. If you look at Medicaid expansion, healthcare, it's a big issue. I did mention that as well. We need to increase our access to healthcare for the citizens, not just in LD9, but throughout the entire state. If someone is healthy and they can eat, they can show up to school a little bit better and focused. So those are the top two.
Okay. Marque Snow gets the next question. Lots of Nebraskans are economically distressed due to COVID. What legislation would you introduce at the legislature to help Nebraskans recover from the economic impact of COVID?
Well, first, I hope the voters support me and elect me to office. If not, if Cavanaugh's in there, I'm going to push him on this issue if he doesn't. And this is to make sure that the state of Nebraska always sets aside an emergency fund to take care of their citizens. And these are our working families. These are our small businesses, to make sure that when we do go through another major flood or another COVID crisis or something like that, we have a fund that is like a trigger fund that automatically gets triggered, and it helps support our small businesses so they're not laying off their employees overnight. It also helps because we have a large service industry. It also will go to families and push back their taxes that they have to pay, because the state will be able to fund our districts and our institutions for the next couple years. I give you an example with Omaha Public Schools. Because of the COVID dollars we received, we were able to buy a bunch of technology to increase our connectivity with our students. However, in our budget as a district, with our policy, we have to have about 20% in reserves. And what I want to do is increase the reserve for the state of Nebraska for emergency, whether it's through floods, whether it's through COVID or anything like that, that the legislature doesn't have to rely on the governor to get funds, and the governor doesn't have to rely on the legislature. It just automatically goes into action to support our families that are out there. If we are always going to talk about that Nebraska is a great place to raise a family, we have to support our families when we are in crisis and not put our heads in the sand.
Okay, well, thank you so much for answering all of our questions. We're going to move now to closing statements.
MaryLee, I don't think I got to answer that one.
Oh, John, I apologize. I'm sorry. John Cavanaugh, go ahead and answer the question.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure, no problem. So lots of Nebraskans are economically distressed due to COVID. What legislation would you introduce in the legislature to help Nebraskans recover from the economic impact of COVID?
Well, yeah, so the economic stress has caused, obviously, a lot of people lost their jobs, and some people are at risk of losing housing. And there's, a housing shortage in Midtown anyway. But when it comes to things like evictions, I've already proposed the idea that everybody should get a lawyer when they go into eviction court. And so there's studies out there that show when somebody goes into eviction court and they have a lawyer, they're 70% less likely to lose their housing and 47% less likely to be evicted, which means in certain number of cases, people still leave the house, but they aren't evicted, which is essentially a negotiated resolution that doesn't have an eviction on somebody's record and doesn't have that hassle, I guess, for the landlord. So I think having a system like that that'll help alleviate some of those problems. We have the national moratorium on evictions, but the problem with that is it's hard to perfect your right to exercise that moratorium. And the number of people who are still being evicted in Douglas County, even though that moratorium is in place, is as a result of the fact that they don't have representation. You could go into eviction court right now and see that folks who have a lawyer are not getting evicted, and people who do have a lawyer are not or who don't have a lawyer are getting evicted. So that's just one thing. Obviously, we need to make sure that they continue the unemployment coverage for folks. We need to make sure we expand Medicaid so everybody has health care. This is a crisis that's demonstrated that everybody needs access to health care and shouldn't have to worry about it. Paid sick and family leave, of course, this has demonstrated the need for that. The amount of time that I've been home with my kids because of this, or my wife has, and I know other people have. Sorry, I'm done.
Okay, now we are done with questions and we will move on to closing statements. John Cavanaugh, you get to give the first closing statement.
Well, thanks again for everybody for being here. This has been fun. And I reiterate, or I guess echo what Mark said, that I hope you elect me, but if you don't, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that Mark is successful, that Legislative District 9 is successfully represented. I started out by saying I'm running because I think we can do a better job of helping everybody in this district. And I think that the COVID-19 situation has demonstrated the places where the weaknesses in our state and our failings, right? It's demonstrated that if we take early action, we could have headed off this problem. So strong leadership in response to a crisis is important. And that we can help people. Government has a role to actually help people. We can do that through ensuring that they don't lose their housing. We can do that by making sure everybody doesn't have to worry about healthcare or where they're going to get their medicine or where they're going to get their test. We can do that by making sure that people don't worry about losing their job when there's a crisis or when they're sick. And we can make sure that everybody in our state feels welcome, safe, secure, protected by our state. And that goes for people of all races, creeds, religions, sexual orientations. Everybody should be protected under our law. Everybody should feel welcome. Everybody should feel safe. And they should feel that they are not worried when the police show up, that the police are going to be the enemy, but that the police are the people who are there to be with them and share in our society and the successes and failures that we all endure together. And so those are the types of things that I think we should be doing. Those are the types of ideas that I'm going to be pursuing in the legislature. I'm going to make sure that everybody gets an equal opportunity at success in Nebraska. And I appreciate everybody's time, and thanks.
Okay, Marque Snow, your closing statement now.
Thank you. Thank you, MaryLee, for having us. And I appreciate being able to share the screen with John. I would first start off by saying, Black Lives Matter. And in our city, in our state, we deserve politicians, we deserve individuals that are willing to put their neck out there, willing to lose their jobs, their career, to support those who are always over-policed, over-judged, those that are the ones that when we go to our county jail, they're the ones that are targeted, just like John mentioned earlier. And we have to support them, we have to empower them, and we have to do everything we can to make sure our state grows and does better. When you look at the state of Nebraska, you look at Legislative District 9, we have an aging population going into retirement, that with fixed income, their property taxes, they're strapped for cash. You also have a new urban group of individuals that is growing, and they're looking for dense housing. You look at our public education system, Omaha Public Schools that is sitting here, and the one line thing that sits in our state is we are lacking funding. We need to make sure that we have equitable funding across the board and that we stop taxing our citizens, overtaxing our citizens to pay for their needs. We need to make sure corporations pay their fair share in our state. We need to make sure that we don't have, property pit our public schools against lowering people's property taxes. That is a challenge for us, and paid family medical sick leave is something that needs to happen in our state. COVID has kind of brought that to light. People shouldn't have to fear losing their job because they're sick. People shouldn't have to fear that they have to lie to their employer because they are afraid of being treated differently. We as a state, we can do better. If we want to attract talent, if we want to keep people here in our state, we have to show that we care about everyone in our state. I will leave you with this. There was a gentleman never mind. Minutes is up.
Okay, well, this concludes our forum for Legislative District 9 of the Nebraska Legislature. The League would like to thank both candidates for participating. For the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, I'm MaryLee Moulton, reminding you to inform yourself about the issues and candidates. Get your mail-in ballots back to the Election Commission before November 3rd. Remember, there are drop boxes if you do not want to put them in the mail. By mail, and on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd, go vote Omaha. Thanks very much.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody. Bye, John. I think I'll see you tomorrow at another event. I think it's
Thursday.